Hello and welcome back to On the Horn with me, your host Steevo, and today I am joined by an editor of Space and Time Magazine, publisher, writer, panel moderator, and networking professional. Her name is Hildy Silverman, and we're going to have a little chat about kind of genre fiction and what we're both nerdy about in terms of that. So, Hildy, thank you for being here with us.
And thank you very much for having me.
Welcome to On the Horn. I'm Steevo, your host, and on this show, I will be interviewing some of my favorite nerds about their own particular flavor of nerdiness and the lengths that they go to celebrate it. As I mentioned, you are the editor of Space and Time Magazine, a magazine which has been running for 50 years now, is that correct?
That's right. This year is our 50th anniversary,
wow.
Although I didn't have it the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I guess kind of the first question that I have is how did you come into that, being the editor there?
Well, I was friendly with the founder and publisher, Gordon Limsner, who started the magazine back in 1966 when he was still in high school.
Wow.
He started it off just mimeographing it and giving it out to people. And it grew from there, and he wound up along the way publishing some really big names. In fact, a lot of first stories by people like Charles DeLint, Kevin J. Anderson, a lot of really well-known people, or they went on to become very well-known. Right. So I enjoyed the magazine, and I was a reader. Mm-hmm. And then, unfortunately, Gordon mentioned to me that he was going to have to probably stop publishing. He had some problems with his health, and he was doing some things in his own career that was getting a little hard to do.
Right.
First, he thought he could sell it to someone, but unfortunately, his other deals fell through, and so he was going to shut it down. Mm-hmm. So we were at the Science Fiction Writers of America annual, what we call the Mill and Swill, which is just a big networking event. And he told me, I'm just going to have to shut down. You know, no one wants it. And then I kind of lost my mind and said, well, what if I want it? And he said, well, what if you do want it? And we talked, and afterwards we worked out a deal, and then I took over. And that was about 10 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've had it for 10 years.
That's pretty cool. I should mention that you were nice enough to send me over an issue, which I read, and I really enjoyed it. A bunch of the stories were great. I think I have a list of a couple of them that I really like. The first one I really love the name of. It was called The Sadly Only Mildly Dramatic Tale of Sigo Uthwen.
Yes. Yes, that's by Scott Andrews, who is a publisher himself. He publishes Beneath Ceaseless Skies, which is an online publication. I think I've tried to possibly send a story to them at some point. Yeah, they're very good as well.
Sounds familiar, yeah. They Came Bearing Dangerous Gifts was a good one with the Imhotep story that was in there.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Probably my favorite one was Zed.
Yes.
Which is a really cool take on like a time travel type, or not time travel, but like seeing through time type story, which was cool.
Yeah.
And Jack Liberty's Son was a really good one. I think that was the last story in it, right?
Yes, I think so. It was D.J. Cockburn, if I remember, is the author. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but yes.
I should have listed the authors for sure. But yeah.
It's hard to keep track of all of them.
But yeah, that was a really cool one about, this boxer. Well, this ex-boxer who was helping, I don't know what you would call it. He was creating elixirs to give to other boxers and sending them on their way. But it had a lot of interesting stuff about Britain versus America and, race relations and things like that in there as well.
Yeah, it covers a lot in a little territory.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you get the stories that come to you for that magazine? Well,
what we do is we open for windows of time. We found, because we're small press, if we stayed open all the time, we would get so backlogged that we'd never get it. People were waiting for years to get their stories out, and that didn't seem right. So we didn't want to just keep buying.
Right.
So we open for about a month at a time randomly as we deplete our resources. Mm. And then when we're open, we take electronic submissions only. And that's because I have 6 first readers, associate editors. And they're all in different places. They're all over the country.
Yeah, easier to get it out to them, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. If I had to mail them to people, we'd never get anything done.
That or type it up yourself, I guess, and that would be a pain too, yeah.
So people send in their stories during that time. There's a submission link that goes up on the website. And then the readers, they all go through and they pick their favorites, and then they bubble them up to our fiction editor, who's Gerard Horner. And Gerard ultimately makes a decision about what to pass on to me. I like to see every story that we accept.
Right.
Because, I feel like, it's my magazine. I actually own it, so I want to know what's going in there.
Of course, yeah.
Gerard has terrific taste. I'd say 99% of the time we agree. I've very rarely said no to something he said yes to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess if you were to say, I don't know if you want to actually talk about this, but like, if you were to say no to one of those stories, can you remember any reasons that you said no to them, or?
Ooh, I know it has definitely happened. I'm a little less forgiving of really bad formatting errors, such as a lot of misspellings and grammar mishaps and punctuation problems. Because I feel like people, if they don't care enough to send us a perfect product, why should I care enough to buy it?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way.
So I think I might be a little fussier on that than Gerard is. I think that happened once. And another occasion, the premise of the story just didn't grab me the way it grabbed him. But like I said, those are very rare circumstances.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Do you do the editing of these yourself once? Do you do the editing of any of these stories yourself once you've accepted them? Or do you do offering any editing advice to people and then get them back or anything like that?
Once in a while, if a story is sort of bobbling on the border of acceptance, we will contact the author and say, if you are willing to make this change, we'll take it. So, for example, but it usually has to be something pretty simple to repair. There was an author who, for example, who sent us something. It was a good story, but the story itself didn't really start till about 4 pages in.
Right.
And when it's short fiction, you can't get away with that. You have to get that story moving. And so I said, if you chop off these first 3 pages and start your story when your story starts, you've got to purchase.
Absolutely.
So things like that,
Okay. That's cool. I completely get that. What are you looking for, I guess, in the stories that you put into the magazine? Other than, just genre fiction, are there specific themes that you look for, I guess, when you accept things?
Not a specific theme, no, but we like to find stories that other magazines aren't publishing so much. We like things that blend science fiction and horror, or fantasy and science fiction, or steampunk and magical realism. We like mashups,
right?
Things that cross the genre borders, and we're willing to take some things that are a little edgier, I think, than other magazines.
Okay,
a little more risque. I don't mind some bad language. That's fine.
Right.
If the violence or if there's sex that's integral to the story, great. Go for it. Be as gory or as vivid as you want.
Yeah, I kind of gravitate towards, I think, magazines or books in general that do that exact thing. I kind of don't like to see authors get cut off because they're cursing too much in their story or anything like that. As long as the story is good and solid, I think that there's room for all that stuff.
Yeah,
it's part of life,
Exactly, and if it's part of the story, if it's organic to the story, if you just throw in the F word every 5 words and it's not adding anything and it doesn't make sense for the character, no.
Right.
But if, you have some hard-boiled character and that's the way they would talk, well, okay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I guess that's kind of the question I was going to ask if you had kind of a checklist of points that you look for, but I guess that's kind of what we just went over.
Well, I'll also throw out that I like to, in each issue, mix the kinds of stories. I don't want an unrelentingly dark issue where every story ends with, and then they die at the end.
Right.
So I like to have a nice variety, some funny stories, some serious stories, some romantic, some dramatic. So we try to go across the spectrum so that each issue has a little something for everyone.
Yeah, and I definitely got that. Well, reading the magazine, I definitely got that out of it. It was there were a lot of different types of stories in there, and there were a couple that I was like, this isn't really my type. Not that it was a bad story, but it just wasn't my type of story. And then there was and then I ran into Zed, and I loved it. And that's exactly the type of story that I like to read and probably would, try to write. At least that type of style is something that I might try to emulate if I was trying to write a story. You actually let me know that you had a short story. When we were going back and forth talking about this, I asked you if you had any short stories out, and you pointed me to one. So I actually bought the book.
Oh, cool.
And read your story, The Great Chasm. Right?
Oh, yes.
Which was a really interesting story and had a lot to it. As I was reading it, I forget how long it was, maybe 15, 20 pages?
Yeah, it was a pretty good size one.
Yeah, there was a lot there, and the whole idea was there was a conductor who would, this is post Civil War II. Mm-hmm. There's a conductor who's taking people. They would take people either to the red states or to the blue states. So there was this whole theme of politics in there, and the theme of the polite racism of the North versus the impolite racism of the South, and a whole bunch of different stories mixed in there. There were two women that were trying to get north, mm-hmm. and they met up with another woman who was pregnant and her conductor. And I don't know, just a lot of interesting stuff that I really liked in there. What kind of gave you the impetus for that story?
Well, I was invited into the anthology. The publisher is someone I've known a long time, Glenn Hauman, and he's a great guy. Mm-hmm. And he had a very cool idea for this anthology called Altered States of the Union, where all the stories involve some different view of the United States. So the United States, if the Louisiana Territory hadn't been purchased, or things like that. They were all different. And the idea for this story had already been brewing in my head. I wasn't sure where I would ultimately send it, but I'd kind of had it in my head for a while because, how can you escape the divisiveness of politics in this country right now, right? So when he said he had this anthology, it was the perfect match. So I sat down. Now, I didn't write this one alone. This is the first story I actually co-wrote with my husband. Mm-hmm. So he contributed to this as well. My husband's an activist. Okay. So this is sort of up his alley. I didn't want to go into that too much because, I'm interviewing you, but I was going to actually ask you, how do you co-write a short story? What parts did you put into it, and what parts did he put into it? Well, it was, in this case, it was more of we talked it through. I talked through my rough idea, my original mm-hmm. rough idea, and he said, well, how about if we tried this, or if this character did it this way, or we include this theme. And then I wrote it, and he went through when I was done to edit. I like to read out loud because you catch a lot that you don't when you're just reading. So I read out loud to him, and he's like, "Oh, that's great, but how about if we did this?" And he wrote a little part, and that's how we did it. I think everyone does it a little differently.
Absolutely, I think I've tried to write with people a couple times before, and it's always difficult to figure out, especially in the beginning, like what which parts work which way and which parts work different ways. It's kind of cool.
Yeah,
but
it's tricky.
For any of our listeners, that's great advice. If you write something, read it out loud to yourself. You catch so much that you had not caught before. I kind of briefly wanted to touch on all those things, but I also wanted to talk about how this story was, it felt like at its heart it was a Western too, which kind of paved the way for towards the end when they start talking about like how the Wild West used to be and things like that. Was that something that was in your mind when you were writing it?
Oh yeah. I definitely heard the characters speaking in like a John Wayne twang. I mean, it seemed like if the United States was in such a mess, which I figure a second civil war would probably leave it, that we would be basically living in frontier times, if not the Stone Age. And for the characters who are the conductors who are living in these badlands that are kind of in between the red states and the blue states, the neutral territories where everything's pretty much destroyed, that they would have to be, cowboyed up. They'd have to be pretty tough, and they'd have to be sort of like the old-time gunslingers.
That was definitely one of my favorite, illustrative points was when they're walking across basically the ashes of D.C. and like... Mm-hmm. All the marble is just littering the ground, Yeah. That was a cool visual that came out of that.
Coincidentally, I had just been in D.C., so I was able to actually go to all the places and make sure what I was writing about matched.
Yeah.
The bridge I described, that is correct, with the statues at the end and what they would look like. Mm-hmm. I went to that bridge and made sure.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Got to do your research.
Exactly.
For sure. All right. I mean, is there anything else about that story or about Space and Time that you wanted to mention? I'm going to move on and talk about kind of your panel moderating and networking in a minute, but if you have anything else you want to bring up or anything that popped into your head while we were talking about that?
Well, I'll just throw out there so that Glenn doesn't find me and slap me, that you can buy the story at Amazon.com. You can buy Altered States of the Union at Amazon.com. It's from Crazy 8 Press.
Absolutely, and we'll put that up on the website and on Facebook when we go live with this one. I guess let's talk about moderating panels. So this was kind of interesting that you sent me an email that said you're a panel moderator, and I mean I don't have any experience doing anything like that, but I do the show, so I talk to people and things like that, and I do like to go to panels and watch them, and I've always been kind of interested in how one moderates a panel and how do you get into something like that. So like what got you into doing panel moderation, and where have you done it, I guess?
Well, I started going to science fiction conventions again, science fiction, fantasy, horror. They usually span all the genres. Once I had taken over Space and Time, I started getting invited to be on panels, and some of my short fiction was getting published, and I was getting better known in the field. So I was on panels, and then I used to be a part of a group called the Philadelphia Science Fiction Society that run PhilCon, the Philadelphia Science Fiction Convention. And because I was on the committee, and I helped with literary programming, I had the opportunity. They're like, well, we need a moderator. Can you do this? And because in my background, I've done corporate training. So I did a lot of stand-up training for mostly telecommunications companies. Mm-hmm. So I'm used to doing that sort of thing. I don't mind, speaking and leading a discussion because I've had to do it professionally. So I started doing it, and it turns out I actually enjoy it. And apparently the conventions enjoy me doing it because now almost every convention I go to, they make sure to give me moderator duties. So most of the conventions I go to are on the East Coast, just by virtue of they're easier to get to.
Yeah.
But I've moderated panels now at, World Fantasy, Aresia, PhilCon, Balticon, Lunacon, RavenCon, a whole bunch of different ones.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have like a favorite
of all the conventions?
Of a panel that you moderated?
Of a panel. Oh goodness. One that comes up at a lot of different conventions is called Tales from the Slush Pile. Mm. That one's always a lot of fun. That's basically a bunch of us editors getting together and talking about some of the interesting things that have come out of our slush piles. And for your listeners who may not know, a slush pile is what we all call the general submissions pile.
Right. When
people send in a manuscript and it goes into a big pile that everyone has to read, we call it slush.
Yeah, and it's always fun to read editors' story, like horror stories from the slush pile. I'm sure there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, so those are usually really fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That sounds like a lot of fun. So you're pretty much all up and down the East Coast on those. Have you gone out west to anything out there and done any panels out west, or?
Not yet. No. I would love to expand a little bit at some point, but the fandom is a little different, and so I don't think the same people know who I am out there. So
yeah, fair enough.
I think I'd have to actually attend and get to know the people, but at some point maybe. I've been to the for-pay conventions out there. There was one called the Grand Slam that was a while back. It was one of those creation conventions where they have all the Star Trek casts and things like that. Okay. I've been to those big conventions, but that was just as a fan.
Yeah, I think I've only been to... Let's see. I've been to Comic-Con a few times.
Oh, yeah.
Which is always fun, but it's getting a little crowded now. I haven't been there in a couple of years.
It's crazy.
It's so slammed now. I think I'm trying to go... I think we're trying to go to the PAX next year in Boston.
Oh, yeah.
Which is it's a video game convention, but we do a video game show. So we're trying to get up there and see what's what.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a good one. I haven't gone to it, but I have friends who are in the business and they've gone.
Yeah. It's, I've heard nothing but good things. Let's move on, I suppose, to your networking. I guess, you said you're a networking expert, I think, or a professional or something like that in the email. I don't remember the exact wording, but what exactly does that entail? What's the...
Well, I wouldn't... maybe expert may be going a little far, but I've found a lot of success in networking with people. And what do I mean by networking? I mean just meeting people, getting to know them in the industry, becoming friends with other authors, editors, publishers. Yeah. Going to events like the sadly now defunct, although it might be back at some point, the SFWA Mill and Swill I mentioned. Things like the Nebulas, where you can spend time with other professionals, World Fantasy, the Worldcon. Yeah. Those are all great opportunities. And even just your basic convention. Right. For networking. And
so just bringing people together, basically, and, like, you know, meeting people of all different rank and file of the publishing world, I guess.
Absolutely. And the fans, too. You know.
Oh, yeah, of course. The most important part.
Absolutely.
The most important part.
Yeah, you definitely want to meet the fans and hear what they want, what they're looking for. Yeah. You know, I'm producing a product for them. I better know what they want and what they're interested in. But I've had a lot of success in that through networking. I now get invited into these anthologies. And if you're a writer, especially short story writer, just trying to throw your stories out there to all the different markets is really tough. That is a hard thing to do. You've already cleared a lot of hurdles if someone goes to you and says, hey, I'm writing this anthology, I'm putting this anthology together, would you write something for me? Yeah. Because unless you really screw it up, you're probably getting in.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, that's worked out very well. So I'm very pro networking.
Great. Yeah, it's a really important part of the business. It's probably I don't know. I feel like I'm getting better at it, but I've been, you know, I've been historically bad at kind of talking to other people, and I just like writing in my little cave where, you know, like talking to 3 of my friends, and that's it. I think doing a show like this actually helps. So if any of you want to learn how to network, either go start a magazine or start a podcast. You'll be good to go.
Absolutely. In fact, the thing is, Balticon always has a very nice programming track that involves podcasters. Yeah. So if you haven't gone to that, that's one you might want to consider.
There's a podcast conference in New York every year that I think we're going to go to next year as well. But that's all up in the air and in the future. But I definitely want to get out to more conferences because I haven't been out to too many of them, you know. Yeah. And they're always fun.
They are.
Crowded or not.
Yes.
You always have a good time. Does that involve a lot of time on social media, working with like Facebook, Twitter, things like that? Or are you more of like go and meet people type of networking, you know?
I would say both.
Yeah. I think you have to be, right?
Absolutely. In this day and age, you really have to do both. Yeah. In my day job, I actually handle social media for a company. Okay. So it's something I'm pretty comfortable with. But yes, absolutely, I include online interactions with that. But that said, you can get a lot more out of face-to-face if you're not so uncomfortable or introverted. That's painful to do. Right. And for some people it is. It's just too much. It's too overwhelming. And in which case I'd say stick to what's at your comfort level.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you can do both, absolutely. Yeah. Do both.
It can. If you are that introverted, for sure. I guess you can kind of come out of that shell a little bit if you are, because I used to be way more introverted than I am now. Kind of have learned to enjoy talking to people and things like that. But it can hurt you even if you're painfully shy. Like it's much better to interact with somebody when you're comfortable, for sure. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, people have different anxiety issues and such. You know, absolutely. It shouldn't be torture. Yeah, yeah. And the other thing about networking is a lot of people think networking equals pushing yourself or sales. Mm-hmm. That you're meeting your favorite author or something, and right away you start talking about your manuscript. Yeah. Go, I write too, and look, here it is. And No. Networking is really just, it's like socializing at a party. You're getting to, you could tell your favorite author, I really like your work. I'd like to talk to you about, if you have time, can I buy you a drink at the bar? Right. 9 times out of 10, they're saying, oh yeah, you can buy me a drink, we can chat. Yes. But it should be a conversation. It shouldn't be, this is who I am, and now I'm going to tell you about why you should help me get where I want to go in my career. That's a good way to tank. Right. And I've definitely heard horror stories about people doing that, and that definitely happens. I feel like probably everybody at the beginning of trying to figure out how all this works has done something dumb like that too, at some point. Oh, sure. We were all young and foolish ones. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to throw this out there, and you can answer it in any way you want, but you
are obviously a huge fan of genre fiction, and I always do kind of a thing with my guests at the end where I give them a question that kind of shows their tastes in whatever they're a nerd for, I guess. So I wanted to ask you, what are your... Let's stick with 5. What are your 5 films, TV shows, books, whatever, that you would recommend to people that really give, like, what you enjoy about genre fiction?
Oh boy.
Yeah. It's always a tough one, right?
That is a tough one because there's so many, and boy, I am such the couch potato too.
And there's no wrong answer to this. You know, whatever pops to the top of your head. It's always fun to see what people say, and like with open-ended questions like this. You know. Sure.
Well, let's see. I guess out of television, I would go with Doctor Who. I was a fan from the old series forward.
Yeah.
Huge geekdom going on there.
It's even way more massive than it used to be at this point, too.
It really is, to see it go mainstream, you know, because I'm old enough to remember when you would say, I watched Doctor Who, and people would look at you like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Now you go into Hot Topic, and then there's TARDISes and sonic screwdrivers everywhere. So I'd say Doctor Who's a big one. Oh, goodness. Obviously, Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I'm a fan of the newest movie.
Yeah, I was a big fan of it too.
I think it was a good restart, especially for younger people who may not have known the older movies as well. And also, as much as we may love them, they haven't necessarily aged that well. So,
yeah,
this is a good way in. Obviously, Star Trek. Pretty much all of them, although Enterprise you might want to skip. But a lot of them, and I actually even like the new movies, which I know is a controversial opinion for some people, but I've been enjoying J.J. Abrams' take on them.
I enjoy the new movies too. Actually, one of the guys that podcasts with us, his name is Chris, is a huge Star Trek fan, and he's doing a talk in AC at the beginning of November about Star Trek.
Oh, there you go.
Which should be interesting. So I took the day off of work. I'm going to go see him give his talk and see how it goes.
That should be fun.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think now in books. Oh, there's so many great ones. My taste in books actually tend more toward horror.
Yeah.
I just read a fantastic book I highly recommend by a fellow named Paul Tremblay, and it's called Head Full of Ghosts, and it's just fantastic. I can't say enough about it. It's not supernatural, but it's horror. It's visceral. It's gritty and realistic, and you feel all the feels, and it's really well done. 5?
I think that's 4. But
that's 4. Let's see. And on Netflix, I would say if you're a fan of the superhero genre, the Marvel series that have been on Netflix, Jessica Jones, Daredevil, we've got Luke Cage coming up, The Defenders. So far, hitting it out of the park. As good as the movies are, and I think the movies are mostly pretty darn good.
Yeah.
The series that Marvel has been putting out, fantastic.
I've been loving them too. Yeah, I've been so excited for Luke Cage. And I would say, unfortunately, as good as Marvel has been, I think DC has been that bad in the movie. Their shows actually aren't that bad.
The shows they're much better at, it seems. But yeah, the movies, they got a ways to go. Although I have hopes for Wonder Woman, because that does look really good. Me too.
But I had hopes for Suicide Squad too, and that was terrible. We just did an episode on that. It was I just ripped on it for an hour. It was so bad. Yeah. But what are you going to do?
Yep.
I keep saying that DC should put their showrunner for their TV shows in charge of making their movies.
Right? I mean, they've got to make some sort of a change.
Yeah, exactly. Get Zack Snyder out of there.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's pretty much it. Hildy Silverman, thank you so much for being here. You can check out Space and Time Magazine. I think it's spaceandtimemagazine.com, right?
Yes, it is.
You can check out the book, Altered States of the Union. You can find that right on Amazon. And otherwise, just Google Hildy's name. You'll find a bunch of stuff on the internets about your writing and your editing and all that type of stuff. So thank you so much for joining us on the Horn.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll see you guys all next time. This has been On the Horn with Steevo. Editing by Stephen Ramosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. And I'll talk to you next time.